The people who transported the giant slabs of rock, carved them, and used them to form these temples of stone have long passed. All who visit the ruins will also one day disappear, but the stone structures will remain. Unlike the people who crafted them, they have become immortal. On a day some 700 years ago, on the shore of Ton Le Sap Lake, a number of the residents of Angkor met some Chinese. Among those Chinese was Zhou Daguan, who was from the town of Wenzhou in Zhejiang province in China's south. On March the 24th in the year 1295, he joined what was a corps of diplomats dispatched from China which had set off for Cambodia, a place of mystery which at the time was known as Khmer. After a period of considerable travel, they finally reached the estuary of the Mekong River. From there, they went upstream and by way of Ton Le Sap Lake, reached Angkor. The scenery they found in Angkor went far beyond anything Zhou Daguan and the other Chinese could have imagined. They were shocked by what was to them a surreal world. Zhou Daguan stayed in Angkor for a full year, and he wrote a book entitled Travel Notes about Khmer. The book tells of what he saw, and it is the oldest record of Angkor set down by a foreign visitor. The Great Wall in China, the pyramids in Egypt, the Borobudur Stupa in Indonesia, and Angkor in Cambodia are often referred to as the four great marvels of the ancient East. From the 9th century to the 15th century, Angkor was the capital of Cambodia. The first temples were built in the city in the year 802, and construction continued for a further 400 years. During this long period, 25 Cambodian kings were involved in temple construction, and in the end, the complex of temples covered nearly 300 square kilometers. 910 of the original temples have been preserved. Historians have divided the temple area in Angkor into 3 construction stages: Angkor Stage 1, Angkor Stage 2, and Angkor Stage 3. The Lantang Mekong River runs south from the Qinghai Tibet Plateau for 4,000 kilometers before reaching the fertile alluvial plain, a plain that has, over the past 1,000 years, been the largest and most important granary in Asia. The ancient civilizations of the East began here, but Angkor is not the only site with sacred temples. Over this immense land, from the source of the great river to the sea, temples and altars can be seen everywhere. Here, human beings and divine spirits live side by side. The people of the city of Lijiang in China's Yunnan province on the upper reaches of the Lantang River built a superb system for conducting river water to wash their streets. The local people of the Naxi ethnic group follow a primitive religion called Dongba. They believe that divine spirits are to be found everywhere, even in every rock. Dongba sorcerers use unique pictographs to copy scriptures, greet deities, ward off devils, pray for happiness and longevity, and prevent disasters. Out of the entire world, the Dongba pictograph is the only pictograph still in use. It seems then that the script itself possesses a divine power. Every occurrence in life is seen as being connected to an unknown but omnipresent force. In Laos, in the province of Luang Prabhang, one can see many Buddhist temples. The most famous is Wat Siang Thong, built in 1560 by the command of King Sethatharath. This Buddhist monastery was witness to a golden era. Wat Siang Thong is made of wood, and it owes its design to local houses of bamboo. In fact, it doesn't look at all out of place among dwellings seen everywhere in the area today. On a wall in the temple is a picture of a tree that depicts stories from Buddhist scriptures. It is inlaid with precious stones that carry people's wishes for everlasting life. Angkor has remained much the same as it was when Zhou Daguan described it in his book written 700 years ago. One part of his book reads, "The city is 10 kilometers in circumference and has 5 gates. Each gate is guarded by 2 defense works. 2 gates open to the east, while each of the others opens in just one direction. The 5 gates are similar. The city moat, which has bridges over it, is deep and wide, and each of the bridges is flanked by 54 stone deities. The stone bridge railing is carved like a snake with 9 heads, and the 54 stone deities seem to be pulling the snakes upward." Visitors to the ancient sites in Angkor often feel they are in an endless dream. The historical buildings of Angkor are a sublime mixture of the surreal, intricate geometric design and exquisite building techniques. They are a fusion of brilliance and mystery, and they feature exaggerated forms side by side with forms from real life. In the year AD 1112, King Suryavarman II ascended the throne of Cambodia. One historical record states, "He was as virtuous as the sun. He could make lotus flowers bloom and cause everything to flourish." It is certainly true that during his reign, Cambodia became the strongest country in Southeast Asia, and in terms of its architecture, Angkor saw its most glorious days. And it was during this illustrious period that Angkor Wat was built. Angkor Wat is the most famous among the building groups of Angkor, and it was built in the period now known as Angkor Stage 2. Angkor Wat is also called the Vishnu Shrine, the reason being that King Suryavarman II worshipped Vishnu, the guardian of Hinduism, and he built Angkor Wat in honor of the Hindu god. Vishnu is the Hindu deity in charge of universal order. Legend has it that the god Vishnu slept on the body of the serpent Seshnaga, or Ananta, as he drifted on the sea of the universe, and that every time he slept, more than 4.32 billion years would pass in the world of mortals. Every time he woke, a lotus flower would begin to grow out of his navel, and the lotus flower would give birth to Brahma, who would begin to create a new world. However, after the new world had evolved for another 4.32 billion years, Siva, the god of destruction and regeneration, would destroy it. According to this pattern, the god Vishnu would sleep and then awake, over and over again, causing the universe to be born and destroyed in a constant cycle. Angkor Wat was built out of huge blocks of stone on an area that is flat. Together, the temple's 1,532 stone pillars weigh an incredible 3 billion tons. Yet while all the stone structures fit together perfectly, no adhesive agent of any kind was used. Most of the stone blocks weigh around 500 kilograms, but the largest weigh up to 10 tons. The tolerance in the walls on the southern and northern sides comes to less than 1 per 1,000. Everyone who comes to Angkor Wat wants to climb to the top, but it is an arduous task. It is often said that Angkor Wat is a giant symbol. Angkor Wat was built in the shape of Sumeru Mountain. According to Hinduism, Sumeru Mountain, located in the Great Sea, is the center of the universe, the place where all the deities dwell, and on its 4 sides are 4 smaller mountains. It is believed that the sun and the moon revolve around Sumeru Mountain. In accordance with this vision of the universe, the builders of Angkor Wat came up with a particularly geometric design. Angkor Wat is, in fact, the world's largest religious building, and it took around 89 years to build. Around 15 million people worked on its construction, and by the time it was completed, King Suryavarman II had been dead many years. Angkor Wat has 3 floors, representing hell, the human world, and paradise. On the ground floor, a long corridor runs around an altar in the middle of a hall, and the walls of the corridor feature exquisite murals. The second tier of the altar is 10 meters higher than the first tier. The altar's highest tier is no less than 65 meters above the ground. On its top are 5 stone stupas, the highest being the one in the middle. This is the very center of paradise. The concept of hell, the human world and paradise is not only depicted in the form of the buildings, but also in the carvings on the wall. The carvings on the corridor wall in the east tell the story of the churning of the ocean of milk. Legend has it that buried under Sumeru Mountain in the churning ocean of milk was the elixir of life protected by a giant snake. In a battle to obtain this elixir, the deities and the devil grabbed the tail and head of the snake, and the struggling snake stirred the seawater into a churning mass of waves. As a result, all life in the sea died and Sumeru Mountain was about to fall. At this, Vishnu transformed himself into a giant turtle and propped up the mountain. 1,000 years later, treasures rose from the bottom of the sea, among them the greatly sought-after elixir of life. At the same time, Lakshmi, who was to be Vishnu's wife, was born from the seawater foam. The carvings on the walls of the corridor depict legends and fairy tales from India. The carvings on the northern wall tell stories about the battle fought by the god Vishnu against the heavenly devil. Those on the northern part of the western wall depict stories from the Indian epic Ramayana. Those on the southern part of the western wall depict the story Mahabharata. The carvings on the southern wall depict a battle waged by Cambodians against invaders. The Mekong River Delta has been a strategic area since ancient times. The land here is as rich as gold, and it enjoys the benefits provided by its many rivers, lakes, and access to the sea. Anyone who could own this land could have great wealth and power.
He was mounted on the elephant back and he holds a bow and arrow. He is going to fight enemy. They parade the soldier under the forest.
The carvings further down reveal Cambodian stone carving skills of even greater sophistication. Each of the wall paintings is 778.28 meters long, and reviewing all of them takes 2 or 3 hours. The stones of Angkor tell of a great period of a brilliant civilization. Here, historical scenes have been immortalized in stone. Bayon Temple is enclosed by a long wall covered in relief carvings. The carvings reveal details of local life, such as trading at a country market, hunting, barbecuing game, treating illnesses, delivering a child, performing music, wrestling, dancing, acrobatics, war, and house building. In all, there are some 11,000 human figures featured in these carvings, and in conjunction with the description in Zhou Daguan's book, we can gain a clear image of Angkor in ancient times. According to the observations of Zhou Daguan, at that time the Cambodian king, his court ministers and his subjects lived in wooden houses with tiled roofs or in crude thatched huts. And while the king wore gold and silver ornaments, he walked about barefoot. Common people, meanwhile, did not have tables, stools or buckets in their houses. Instead, they cooked in pottery pots, used coconut shells as ladles, ate with their fingers, and slept on straw mats on the bare floor. And these same people built the magnificent city of Angkor on a grand scale. Archaeological finds revealed no traces of human settlement anywhere near Angkor Wat, and finds of everyday utensils were rare. A number of Western experts doubted that Angkor Wat was even built by the Cambodians. But in the end, they were proved wrong. As time has passed, more and more archaeological finds have shown that the temple was indeed built by the ancient Cambodians. When the French established the Far East Research Institute, they sent a researcher to the Institute's Cambodia branch to conduct research at the Angkor site for several years. After comparing the facial features on the stone statues at Angkor with those of modern Cambodians, he came to the conclusion that they looked very similar. Ban Tie Srey is commonly referred to as the Queen's Palace, but in reality it was not a palace for a queen. It was built by King Jayavarman V in AD 967, but it features numerous carvings of goddesses. This grand temple, located 25 kilometers from the city of Angkor, was built to honor the Hindu deity Shiva. The temple is part of what is now termed Angkor Stage 2, and as such, it bears the obvious influence of Hindu architectural styles. Construction of Greater Angkor began in the year 889 at the behest of the Cambodian king Yasovarman I, and his successors carried on his work for the next 200 years. By the time King Suryavarman II wanted to build Angkor Wat, there was no vacant land left in the city, and the king had little choice but to have a temple built on the outskirts of town. Today, all we can see of many of the once grand buildings are their foundations and some broken walls, but some of the temples are in a good state of preservation. The most famous can be seen in the center of Angkor, Bayon Temple. In the Khmer language, Thom means big. During the reign of King Jayavarman VII, the population of Angkor Thom grew to more than 1 million. As he wanders through the great stones, admiring the neat symmetrical buildings and the ruins of past glory, this young monk has a sense of the eternal. Jayavarman VII was a great Cambodian king. A believer in Mahayana Buddhism, or the greater vehicle of Buddhism, this king sat on the throne for 4 decades, and during his reign, Cambodia became the strongest empire in Southeast Asia. The city of Angkor was greatly expanded, and many Buddhist temples were built. The world-renowned statues bearing the Cambodian smile represent the 4 great states of mind promoted in Buddhism: kindness, sympathy, happiness, and tranquility. In Bayon Temple, visitors find themselves in a labyrinth of huge stones in the form of blooming lotus flowers arranged in neat lines, while the statues smile at each other while looking down at the seemingly insignificant humans below. The base of Bayon Temple is 80 meters square. The central stupa rises to 43 meters above the ground, but there are in fact 54 stupas of different heights forming a stupa group, and at the top of each stupa, on all four sides, are giant stone statues of the Guan Yin Buddha. In all, on the 54 stupas, there are 216 statues of Buddha, and this has led Cambodians to conclude that King Jayavarman VII probably looked much like the image portrayed in these Guan Yin Buddhas. The deities depicted in these stone statues are smiling, and even though it is now dark, due to the clean bright light of the moon, they can still be seen. Ancient craftsmen constructed this site dedicated to the divine long ago, and their legacy lives on. Every day as the sun rises, it first strikes the spire of the divine hall, and birds sing in a dawn chorus to accompany chanting monks. The Bagan region is famous for its many stupas. This was the capital of the Bagan kingdom, a kingdom that ruled from the 11th century to the 13th century. Building stupas was, of course, a Buddhist tradition. In fact, the most cherished lifetime wish of Buddhists, whether they were kings, monks or common people, was to build a stupa and dedicate it to Buddha. And in its heyday, the kingdom of Bagan boasted no less than 13,000 stupas, although it was known as the city of 40,000 precious stupas. The famous stupa Shwezagon was built in a unique form. Around it stand 36 deities found in primitive shamanism, and its existence reveals that at that time Buddhism, by then the most powerful religion of its time, did not reject other religions. This tolerance is a feature of religious life in the Lantang Mekong River Basin. Near the city of Da Nang in Vietnam is a place called My Son. During the Champa Kingdom period, this was a very sacred place, and its history of constructing religious sanctuaries stretches back much further than that of Angkor. The architecture here shows the influence of Hinduism, but the local architects did not simply adopt Hindu building styles in a passive manner. They blended Hindu influences with their own native styles. Prior to 1946, there were some 50 well-preserved ancient buildings in My Son. But in the 1960s, during the war, My Son suffered heavy bombardment. Today, only 20 temples remain standing, but none are in perfect condition. For more than 200 years, Thailand was ruled by the Sukhothai Kingdom, a regime that saw its heyday during the 13th century. In the Thai language, Sukhothai means happy morning. During the reign of the kingdom's fifth king, the art, architecture and sculpture of ancient Thailand reached a high point. The statues of Buddha, made during this period, are unique. The heads feature a tongue of flame, the faces bear mellow expressions, and the bodies are full yet graceful. Many relief carvings on the walls and pillars in Angkor have been preserved, and goddesses are the main theme. The goddesses stand on lotus flowers in graceful positions, and they sport as many as 36 different hairstyles. Tower Prom Temple was built by King Jayaviravaman VII in honour of his mother. But today the temple looks like a battlefield where evil deities have fought against great nature herself. Here, over the past several hundred years, it seems that the snake spirit has led other spirits of the jungle, such as vines, mosses, thunderstorms, lightning and wild beasts, as well as the scorching sun and the darkness of the night, on an unrelenting attack on the sacred temple. The roots of the tree spirits have climbed the pillars to the roofs and have crept into the crevices of the stones and wrapped themselves around the frames of the windows and doors. Some of the roots have even reached the very heart of the temple. But this fight with nature has inevitably led to the sacred temple becoming one with the great earth, and now the earth, the jungle and the temple cannot be separated. Nature has not destroyed the temple, but has instead brought it to new life and made it indestructible. Westerners long believed that Frenchman Henri Moreau discovered Angkor. Moreau, a former middle school teacher, was a scientist whose passion was nature, and in 1858 he embarked on an adventure to the Mekong River that was to change his destiny. His team came across Angkor as they were making their way through the primeval jungle in Cambodia's Battambang province, and locals led them to Angkor Wat. Even by that time, the temple had been encroached upon by the jungle, and a number of its halls had collapsed, but some were still standing, and wild animals were using parts of the complex as lairs. Moho wrote in his diary, "An arena that was once filled with joy and glory has been reduced to a heap of ruins." In 1907, Europeans began work on tracing the history of the Angkor Wat ruins and, more importantly, surveying and numbering each site and even every object in each site. At the time, there were two opinions about this work. Some held that all the foreign objects should be removed and that the fallen buildings should be rebuilt. Others proposed that remedial repairs be carried out to preserve the mysterious atmosphere of the ruins. In the end, the authorities decided to maintain the ruins much as they were found, and this principle has been followed to the present day. However, a team of specialists from China that repaired the Potala Palace in Tibet was placed in charge of the reconstruction of Chao Sai Dvoda Temple, which stands outside the east gate of Angkor Thom. Today, we may find it difficult to conjure up images of the magnificent scenes that must have been viewed here as the sacred temple was being built, a massive project that bears testament to the strength and intelligence of Cambodians in ancient times. The huge rocks were carried by elephants, which were regarded as a divine force sent by heaven to help in the construction of Angkor. Legends told in the Mekong River basin state that the elephant is an incarnation of the god of wisdom. The story goes that the divine guardian had just left to engage in battle when his wife gave birth to a son. Several years later, however, he returned, but his son refused to let him into the house. The father, enraged and not knowing the boy was his son, lopped off the child's head, which then rolled into the jungle. After he learned that the boy was indeed his son, he felt great regret and ordered that his son's head be found, but no one could find it. He then had the head of an elephant placed on his son's neck, upon which his son was miraculously resurrected to become the god of wisdom. The Cambodian king trained many elephants for battle and demonstrated his power by parading them. It is said that the king often reviewed his army of elephants from the top of this reviewing stand, which was known as the Terrace of the Elephant. In early times, the central area of Angkor was at Bagan Mountain. On the mountainsides once stood an imperial palace, Buddhist temples and the houses of common people alongside crop fields. And it was here that the city of Angkor was born. The rising sun sheds its first light on Bagan Mountain and the last light of the day recedes from the mountain. Watching the sunset from the top of Bagan Mountain has become something of an essential activity for tourists. Here they wait for that last moment, a moment that has been traversing time and space. The land of Angkor is bathed for a moment in the glow of the setting sun as the Mekong River plain disappears in the darkness. At sunset every day, local people like to take a rest by Angkor Wat's city moat, as if keeping vigil by the holy temple. People come here to enjoy the cool breeze and the peace and quiet of the evening. At dusk, this ancient site reminds the beholder of a scene described by Zhou Daguan in his book Travel Notes about Khmer, in which the king of Angkor is setting off on an outing. In his book, Zhou Daguan describes the scene as follows. The king emerged from the city with an army leading the way, and with a guard of honor composed of banner bearers, drummers, and musicians. An entourage of 300 to 500 palace maids dressed in colorful clothes held huge candles. Carts drawn by goats and horses were decked out with gold ornaments. Court ministers and members of the royal family rode at the front on elephants. There were countless red umbrellas. The queen and imperial concubines rode in sedan chairs or carriages, or on horses and elephants. There were no less than 100 umbrellas of gold. After them came the king standing on an elephant, holding a sword in hand. Many soldiers on elephants and horses stood guard around His Majesty.